Hi everyone, so the Season 5 PTR has concluded a few days ago and I have finally collected all of the feedback that I have sent to Blizzard. So I want to also share it with you and maybe get a few more points, maybe a few more little details about stuff that maybe you have seen, maybe you have played the PTR, or just any other random points about the game that we hope the Blizzard will improve. Now, in Season 5 you might have seen some of my videos or other people's, or maybe just played it, and a lot of people are definitely unhappy with how things are going with this new Infernal Horde system that you see in action here right now. For example, this is a clip from me playing the PTR in this new wave survival mode. And a lot of people think that it's not very fun, not very rewarding, and I kind of agree with that. And a lot of people are looking towards a Season 5 that they will maybe not enjoy. However, I think it's not just all doom and gloom. I also want to give Blizzard some credit for what they have done, which is they have introduced a lot of cool new items. They have been trying to shake out the banner, and they are still doing a rework of every single unique item in the game that we have not even seen. We have not seen the season theme. So in general, there's a lot more stuff coming that we don't even know about. And I'm sure that they will also fix a lot of the issues that we have found on the PTR. It was very buggy. It was, yeah, just kind of untestable in some regards when it comes to some of the builds and some of the new items. And this new Infernal Horde system here also needs a lot of work. So I have prepared a featured document about this. But I also think that despite everything, Season 5 is going to be great. I would just remind, I guess, that, well, Season 4 exists and is real and everyone loved it. And nothing of Season 4 is going anywhere. So either way, the game will remain just as a baseline, a good level, I think. And whatever they add on top of it, even if it's not the best, well, it's just an extra, basically. So that's how I see it. And Blizzard has also done a really good job at just fixing stuff that was broken, buggy, really out of whack back in Season 4, for example. When the PTR went live there, we had kind of similar issues, I guess, with the testing and with how things are working. And they have shown that they can handle it. So I'm kind of confident that Season 5 is going to be great. Let's go into the feedback. So I have prepared this feedback document here. It is like 10 pages or something. I try to keep it short, but I have feedback here for, first of all, the Infernal Hordes and then each of the classes individually. So there's like 1 or 2 pages per class, kind of broken up in little topics. I'm not going to read it word by word now or something like that. I just want to go over the big picture here of what is going on. So let's start with the Infernal Hordes, what you see here in the background. Now the thing is, the Infernal Hordes is supposed to be some kind of roguelite mode where you get these banes and boons. And this means that, for example, if you compare this to something like Hades, or also that a lot of people love, you would think that, okay, this changes a little bit the gameplay, this changes, what is going on, what you're doing, what the monsters do, but it doesn't really feel that way. It's just okay, you press a bane and a boon, there's always at the end of the wave. I can show this here real quick. You get these options here, Hellfire rains down on you, and then you get this Ether. Ether is this currency that you use for the rewards at the end. There's some chests you open of that. And for example here, Soul Spires require ×2 kills, you get grant ×2 Ether. So the thing is that basically all of these boons and banes are kind of reward based. At least the boons are, the things that are supposed to making you stronger. And there's nothing kind of cool going on. This is a very repetitive game mode. You stand in this room and there's these waves of monsters spawning, which can be fine on its own, but I think there needs to be more action. There needs to be something that changes every single run. I want to get boons that actually do something for my character, something crazy, I want something like permanent unstoppable, something like, extra speed, maybe shoot extra projectiles, or I don't know, unlock the power of a random aspect for the rest of the run. Or, something like that. Just make it go crazy. There could be 1,000 possibilities. And it's kind of one of the main gripes I have with the system, that all you try is just stack up as much Ether as possible, but that should already be kind of the main reward on its own, depending on how well you do. The interesting part here would be to find a good combination of boons. Maybe there would even be some that, for example, upgrade, a certain effect into a better effect when you get it multiple times. Or maybe a combo you can do, like a recipe or something like that. So this is kind of the stuff that I'm looking for from such a mode. And I think this is kind of a huge opportunity here for Blizzard to make something really cool that is different from the rest of the game, and something where maybe some people just love it, Maybe it's just going to remain some super optional mode. There's currently at least no specific rewards attached to the Infernal Hordes outside of higher chances to get certain uniques and certain aspects that they're introducing now, but you could also just find them anywhere else. So there is nothing like Nightmare Dungeons where you have to go here and get your Glyph XP, or like pits where you have to go here and have to get your Masterworking mats. So this will remain purely optional, so I think you could make something kind of wild out of it, and I would really love to see that. Now this obviously means like a kind of pretty major rework of the system, but I mean, they have a month to go and we'll see. So this is kind of like the main thing that I want to kind of see here. In general, the rewards are trash, so on the PTR it was not worth it all, so at the very least this needs to be rewarding, because each of those runs is like 10-15 minutes or so, if you're relatively fast, and yeah, you get nothing for it basically. One problem that I also found is like expired timers don't really hurt you in any way, outside of just you losing time. But basically you have this timer here for the waves, they last 1.5 minutes, and then you get infinite amount of time to clean everything up. And you can technically go to like, you know, tier 8 for example, and just fight every wave for like 10 minutes after the timer has elapsed, basically cleaning up monsters, which is not very efficient. But for like, if they ever make like, for example, the high tiers really valuable and then everyone wants to go there, then this is what people will do. So that's a bit of a problem. The compasses, which are basically the sigils or the keys to enter, they are all the same and they don't stack, and there's not really any difference. Like, I would like if there was like some kind of like, you know, certain random rolls on these compasses, similar to what I described earlier with the boons, for example. Maybe there would be like, you know, an effect on a compass itself that already tells you a little bit, okay, this has maybe like a theme, or maybe certain things show up more often or something like that. There's a lot of options here. And what I'd also like to see is something like an Uber mode, where it's like maybe some endless mode or so. I'm thinking about, for example, Diablo 3 Echoing Nightmares. Now we are kind of like taking Diablo 3 systems more and more, and I'd say this is actually one that would fit really well here in this as like a inspiration, I guess. So if you don't know Echoing Nightmares, it's basically also similar to this, like a wave survival thing, but it has like a bar that fills up the more monsters are on the screen. And when that bar is full, you lose. So basically the monsters get harder and harder, they deal more damage, they have more health with every wave, and it just keeps spawning. There's no stopping, it just keeps spawning all the time. You could maybe do this stopping with the waves, and then every wave becomes harder. Either way works, I guess, as long as you fix this like expired timer problem. And imagine that you could just do like a 1 hour run or a 2 hour run, and you stack up like 50 different boons and stuff goes really wild. And then at the end you get like some kind of like crazy reward or something like that. Or maybe there's like certain, you know, breakpoints, like if you manage to beat a wave 50 in the endless mode, you get a certain thing. Or if you manage to beat a wave 100, you get like some huge title or achievement or something like that. And it should not be like, you know, something that always fails basically at some point. Like you always will get overwhelmed. This would be kind of interesting as well, I believe, for such a mode, and would make every run kind of like exciting to see like how far can you go in this run with, you know, that combination of boons that you got with your character, and something that cannot just be overpowered with raw strength basically. So this is kind of what I think would be cool here. And we already have the pit scaling that goes to basically infinity, so this would be relatively easy, I guess, to even introduce here. So that's kind of like my main points here about the Infernal Hordes. Right now I am not really too convinced that I want to do this a lot, outside of maybe farming the new items and trying it out a bit and seeing what they do with it. But there are a lot of really cool ideas here, not just what I just described, but also other people I've seen like talk about it. And yeah, let's see what happens, I guess. But for now, Infernal Hordes, not too exciting, but it is a new system and it will also just remain in the game, which means they might tweak it, they might add some more stuff over time. We have seen that, for example, the Gauntlet, which is kind of forgotten. But Blizzard is still tweaking Gauntlet, for example. If you have been paying attention to that, they have actually changed it quite significantly from Season 3 mid-season patch to Season 4 start, and I think again a little bit. So they are doing some little stuff here and there. And if, for example, Infernal Hordes remains like an extra system that we can choose to do or not to do, that'll be fine. If not, everyone loves it, I guess. Alright, let's talk about the classes a little bit. So class balance is kind of out of whack here. I'm going to start with the Rogue. And then we have Sorc, Barb, Necro, Druid. I'm just going to go from top to bottom here. Rogues I probably have the most. I've played it the most. That's my main, of course. So let's just talk through this. So some big things here is momentum, melee rogues, flurry rework, these kind of things. That actually works surprisingly well, mostly thanks to, for example, the new temper for damage per active Dark Shroud Shadow. I made a video about that single-handedly makes momentum kind of viable. There's also some kind of cool things you can do with like the extra maximum energy momentum gives you now. Some bugs exist with momentum. For example, it gives you a stack when you use a cutthroat skill, like a melee skill, and it removes a stack when you use a non-cutthroat skill. But for example, this is bugged and also removes stacks from item procs, like Elemental Surge or Bursting Venoms and these kind of things. So I hope they fix that, else momentum will be really clunky. There's also an aspect for it where you need to have maximum stacks. I would like that to be reworked to be a buff per stack, just to make it more consistent, because else you have like this huge gap and then this kind of like, you know, drop when you for some reason spend any of your stacks or so. So it's just like to smooth that out a little bit. Wind Force, oh boy. That thing is still trash, I would say. It's kind of like a meme weapon, like it remains a meme weapon. They made it a barrage only item and now has a flat chance of knocking back. So we have made some improvement here. I've been talking about this for a year. Make it a flat chance, but now it's a barrage only item. And barrage is like the one skill that does not want to knock enemies back ever, basically. Like you need to stand as close as possible to your enemies with barrage. So that doesn't really make much sense. At the very least, it could become maybe some kind of speed farming item. I guess not every item needs to be like, you know, the #1, you know, best in slot for the pit. It can be an item that is maybe exclusive to just like some kind of light-hearted, like Nightmare Dungeon farming or Helltide farming or something like that. But at least give it something that helps here. You know, something like a, you know, Wind Force related, maybe like, you know, go very fast. You have like some extra movement and attack speed or so that goes beyond the cap, for example. I don't know, some ideas. Wind Force not really in a good spot. Flurry. Flurry is overall pretty cool in the future. It has gotten some cool dash. So that is nice. Flurry feels much better. One thing I don't like about it is that its main problem, the single target damage, has not been solved. Yes, they made it generally a lot better, but they made it better under all circumstances, which means you're still going to run into those extremely long boss fights. I would love for Flurry to get an effect that is kind of like a stacking damage buff, similar to the old exploit weakness, a stacking damage buff per target, where it's just mostly active at the boss and not so much in the rest of the run, so that they actually feel a bit of a difference in the damage output on the boss, so that they are not so atrocious. So I think that's really what Flurry needs. Otherwise, Flurry is in an okay spot. I don't think it's going to be meta or something with the current scaling, but maybe they're going to do some more tweaks there. Shroud of Conduras. Now, this is a pretty big item here. This is a new unique here for the rogues that gives you 3 seconds immunity when you press Dark Shroud, and it gives you evade a way to pull enemies together, at least behind an explosion that pulls in enemies when you evade. A very powerful item. That could basically be split into 2 if you ask me. This could be 1 Dark Shroud item and 1 evade item. It is that good. And this is probably going to be used in almost every single rogue build. For some reason right now, the evade explosion also carries 100% lucky hit. So that's ridiculous. You can use Andario's rogue with this. You evade into a pack, you hit 10 targets, you get 1000% lucky hit, you get, you know, 5 Andarius procs, boom, like it's crazy. And this is kind of wild. This item is like meta defining, I would say. Then we have Preparation. There were some buffs for this. It gets damage reduction, kind of cool. However, the damage reduction buff is very short, so this effectively only really works for like Death Trap builds and not really so much for Rain of Arrows builds. And well, Shadow Clone does not exist, I guess. So there's only those 3 ultimates. I would like to see like a bit more of like a more consistent effects from this, like a longer duration basically, for just helping out Rain of Arrows builds in particular. Same thing with no witness nodes, for example, on the Paragons. So that would be nice. Rain of Arrows, speaking of it, is pretty weak still, I would say. So they've tried to buff it. They made it so that the Arrow Storms buffs now also benefit. Rain of Arrows, for example, kind of cool. I love playing Rain of Arrows, but I don't think that's really gonna go anywhere. It's gonna remain some kind of like fun build. You can kind of do it. It kind of works, but it's just also a real anti-synergy between Arrow Storms and Rain of Arrows. Rain of Arrows is usually a poison-based build with imbuement. Arrow Storms, you can't do anything with it. No imbuements. It's a pure physical effect. So it has like 2 different like directions you're trying to scale into. If you try to do damage with both, so that doesn't really work. And even if you try to do like non-poison Rain of Arrows, then it's usually a precision build that also doesn't benefit your Arrow Storms. And yeah, there's just like no synergy basically. It's just that there's like a thematic connection and the visuals, but it's not really anything else that is going on here. So it needs to be a better connection, maybe a way to play a physical Rain of Arrows build, or I don't know what. But yeah, right now, not really great. That being said though, I made a video about Arrow Stomps itself, like a pure Arrow Stomps build, and that is actually going to be a thing. That actually has some serious damage output, and I think it's going to be one of the best starting builds that people will play, and then later transition into the Andariel's Rogue once they get the Helm, because their setups are actually fairly similar. So that is really cool and something to look forward to. Then we have Trick Attacks. This was a reworked passive that gives you now crit chance and crit damage. It stacks up and you need to daze enemies for that. Right now, it's an oversight. I posted this on X at some point actually. You can get 39 ranks of trick attacks, which leads to some pretty funny outcomes, like this here, for example. Yeah, that should not exist, I guess. This is just an oversight with similar to what happened, for example, with the Necros on the Season 4 PTR, where they had like 30 ranks of Golem Mastery or something like that. So it was just like on the wrong slots. This is a utility temper because this used to be a utility passive. Now it's a damage passive, and you can still temper it everywhere. So kind of funny stuff, but that needs to be fixed. And I guess I will just become like a amulet passive, I guess. It's just like any other damage passive. Generally, I don't like the rework very much though. The thing is that it is really powerful, even if you have only 3 ranks. And then if that becomes an amulet passive, you really want to have that. And it's going to be pretty good, but also it will not work on the boss. And I really hate stuff that doesn't work on the boss, especially for rogues, because they're already like really weak on the bosses when they're not staggered, and this just makes it way worse because it's really powerful and overtuned. On top of it, it double dips with precision, so it's kind of busted. Alright, then we have the Umbra Crux, my favorite new unique item. I dedicated an entire video to this. I love it. The design is really cool. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that we expected. These things cannot be CC'd. They do have some other upsides, like they are always full health, so full exploit value, for example. But the fact that you can't CC them, you can't apply a lot of conditional effects to them, makes this damage split effect kind of worthless. However, on the PTR, it was omega bugged, and especially when you hit it very fast, it was kind of like forgetting that it should have a lower damage like value basically. So it's supposed to split 30%, but it was actually splitting 100% or more. I think it was also double dipping on a lot of stuff. Lots of bugs basically with this thing. My recommendation would be to either make it work the way you expect, so that it does exactly 30% every time, and you can also CC it, because if not, then yeah, why does it even exist? Because every rogue build relies on CC in some way. And otherwise, I think it would also be fine to just make it like a totem that you can hit, because just having an extra target is already valuable on its own for a lot of builds. So it could also just not split any damage and just be a target dummy, so to say, and that gives you lucky hits that can be helpful. That gives you like the split for barrage, that gives you the extra split or the extra pierce for the pen shot. So there are some builds that would probably run Umbra Crux anyway, regardless of it doing damage or not. So this is kind of like what I would like to see. Maybe buff the stats a little bit or something like that. It would also be cool if, for example, it would allow to have, for example, this affected by traps effect on enemies. So right now it doesn't trigger ambush cliff, it doesn't trigger deadly ambush, these kind of effects, or exposure, for example. That would be a really nice feature of this unique item here. Now some other stuff here is like a few bugs and so on. For example, this here gives you like a double dipping life modifier. Then we have the Trickster's aspect, also buggy, so that hopefully gets fixed. Grenade bit in general, I think it's pretty genius how Blizzard has designed like basically a grenade core skill build now. You can do smoke grenade only build, so to say, and just spam it like a core skill. It does feel a bit clunky though, because the cooldown reset only happens when you hit elite targets, not even minions or champions. And sometimes you just have to go for the champions because they're in a different place than the elites. And then you have like this clunky downtime. I would love for that to be more smooth out a little bit, more streamlined, where maybe you get a cooldown reset, like a smaller cooldown reset when you hit normal targets, for example. So you can throw it into a trash bag and you don't have to skip all of the little monsters. Other than that, I was kind of expecting we'd see something like an extra grenade skill in the expansion, for example, or some grenade theme or device theme for rogues as in general as like extra skill line for the expansion. But I guess not, because now we have Smoke Grenade basically just being a core skill build. And that actually is kind of nice. Not like the best build, but it works. Then we have utility aspects that are actually offensive. So this is something that has bugged me for a while, especially those 3, Noxious Eyes, Concussive Strikes, and Frostbitten. They're all used for damage and not for its utility. Basically always occupying the boot slot, and in some cases even the amulet slot, like Andariel's Rogues put Noxious Eyes on the amulet as their most powerful offensive power, basically. And it has been buffed. It is now 35% extra damage. And on the amulet, that's like 50% almost or something like that. That is insane that this is called utility aspect. And I really hope that these are being changed to offensive so that we actually have utility aspects that we can put in our rogue builds. Because there's a lot of kind of cool, interesting stuff, also mobility aspects, but you just never want to take them, at least for like serious content, for serious builds, because those exist and they always go in a boot slot. So that's kind of stupid. And I would love to see that changed. Yeah, it would mean like a slight nerf to rogues, but they can kind of take it anyway right now. So this will be good. Exploit weakness. Now you might have seen some funny clips here. Exploit weakness has been redesigned. This is a legendary node on the paragons on rogues. It executes everything from full HP. So that is first of all a bug, I guess. It should only execute 35% or less HP monsters, I guess. And it also executes elites, which is also a bug because it says it only executes non-elites. So basically what people do is they go into pit 200, just attack a pack for like 5 seconds, it explodes, and then you move on basically. So that's obviously pretty stupid. Honestly, I would just go back to the old exploit weakness. I'm not sure why it was even changed. Everyone liked it, I guess, anyway. And basically every single rogue build was running exploit weakness already, so why would we change it? So I don't really like the new design. I would just revert it, to be honest. I talked about no witnesses. Twisting blades. It could need a new temper, so it has been mega buffed in Season 4. It is really good now, but it still doesn't have any kind of real viable temper option on the weapons, which is kind of sad. And I would like to see something cool like blades return twice. It's all about the returning blades on twisting blades anyway, and that would be a cool temper that kind of goes with the theme of these like range skills where they come back. Alright, that was it about rogues. So this was like the biggest class feedback I have. Let's talk about the sorcerers. Sorcerers, I've tried out the new items, and I've tried a bunch of different builds, and also like in previous seasons I've tried some builds, so let's talk about those. Let's start with the big one, the Axial Conduit. I made a video about this, and oh boy, this thing has a lot of problems. So it does have like real anti-synergy with itself. Basically, you only want to have one chain lightning out, and if you cast more chain lightnings, which can happen automatically from the pants itself, because there's a chance to cast twice, then you lose damage per chain lightning. So technically, it is still better to spam chain lightnings really fast, depending on what you're trying to go for with the build at least, but you don't really gain much out of it. So you kind of want to cast one chain lightning and then just wait 10 seconds, so to say, and do other stuff, and that will probably yield you better results. So that is weird, and that needs like a bit of a change. For example, make each chain lightning have a higher maximum mana drain, so that it has the same amount of trips from you to the enemies and back and forth. Basically, that'll be a start. Maybe make it work with the double cast as well. But in general, I think it also has like a massive single target problem here. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed. And honestly, I would just like kind of bounce it back to the devs and see what they do with that feedback, because yeah, right now it's kind of down bad. Then we have Vox Omnium. I also made a video about that. Basically, I concluded this is exclusively a Frostbolt DPS build item. Frostbolt build does not exist in the current game, and if you do like the math, it turns out that with Vox Omnium, maybe you could make a build that is like 30 to 50% stronger than a Season 4 live build. Outside of like maybe other buffs to whatever happens in Season 5 of the Sorcs, which so far have not really happened. So this means it is absolute trash, because who has played Frostbolt as a serious DPS option? Well, I have with this item, and I was kind of able to struggle my way through a pit 70 with this. So it needs like at least 2 more zeros to get anywhere basically, and that means we're very far away from this ever becoming a build. It doesn't work with Spark really well, because Pain Gorgers only works for the first hit. It doesn't really work with Firebolt, because Firebolt already has Flame Weaver, and those two uniques don't synergize. So it's basically a Frostbolt item, and there needs to be something way crazier and way cooler to make this good, because right now this is like dead on arrival. Then you have Lightning Spear. I made a video about that as well. This is my favorite build for Sorcs right now. Really cool stuff. Really good build that I think a lot of people will play in Season 5. You can go check out my video. So even in the current state of the game, I think this is definitely something to look forward to for the Sorcs. One problem it has though is that when you have double and triple casts of Lightning Spears, they are kind of stupid, especially on boss fights, and they just fly off into nowhere. So you kind of have only the option to try to shotgun them right from melee range, try to have the Lightning Spears go through them at least once, and then yeah, that needs to be fixed basically. Like they need better targeting. For some reason they just like lose their target when there's multiple of them. So if that gets fixed, that's going to be a really nice build, even without any other changes. and we'll see how it'll play out. Then we have Hydras. I also tried that. It is fairly strong on bosses, but it has no AoE. It would be nice if there was some option here to maybe upgrade them, make them pierce, chain, AoE, something like that. Because Hydra on its own cannot clear, really, basically. I saw some people combine Lightning Spear and Hydra, so that was actually someone who had some decent success with that. But I think that, at least in the current state of the game, doing hybrid builds between two skills just doesn't work out. It doesn't work for the rogues, it doesn't really work for the Sorcs. Like, I'm not sure if like anyone really does that. So yeah, I think this needs a bit of love here. Meteor, this is unrelated to Season 5 changes, but something I wanted to say. I've played it in Season 4, and it's like unplayable if you don't have ridiculous amounts of cooldown and a 6.0 Starfall Coronet. So when they rework this unique, I would really love to see some tweak here to make this like actually playable when you don't have incredible gear. It's especially kind of like weak build as well. So it would be nice if you could at least play it, you know, without hyper investment. Incinerate, yeah, there's like some issues here. Like the, for example, the Flame Scar unique is just outclassed by putting a flamethrower aspect on a two-handed weapon. Also, for example, they're nerfing Incinerate because they're nerfing Burning Instinct. In general, all the burning builds are getting a bit of a tweak down, which is okay, I guess, for Firebolt, but not okay for Incinerate. And there needs to be some change here. Also, the Tempera doesn't really work, for example. Charge Bolts has like a massive single target problem, so whenever they rework the unique stuff, I think this should be solved. Crackling Energy has a massive quality of life problem. Like, it's just, if you make a Crackling Energy build, you have to like go and pick it up. And it's just so annoying. Like, you just run around all the time, do nothing else. There would be maybe some utility temper that picks it for you, or some increase in size of the pickup radius that maybe scales up. Maybe if you're int or something like that would be cool. Survivability for the Sorcs, well, it is actually fairly decent now, again, I'd say, because they have this new slice steps aspect. It's actually open to everyone, but it definitely benefits the Sorcs by far the most. This is something that I would put into almost every single Sorc build. They also have the reworked Veer's Mastery, and its reworked aspect that is really powerful. So all the lighting builds that don't need to run the overwhelming energy can run that, and it makes it just tanky. So in general, the Sorc defenses are decent. I made a video about that. For some reason, got downloaded to hell because everyone was angry about the state of Sorcs. I can understand, and I guess sharing positive news about the Sorcs is not recommended currently. Either way, it is looking really good on the survivability side, I'd say. And even hardcore viability is pretty high. And the main thing that is kind of missing here is like life best Sorcs and the no defensive skill theme that Blizzard has been trying to push with some of the aspects and so on. That is still not really happening, I think. And there needs to be more support for that. For example, maybe a new glyph, new paragons, you know, some new passives. We have, for example, warmth already and these kind of things. But it's not really enough. We don't have like anything that goes close to like what protection passive can do for your Sorc in order to keep you alive for like a life-based Sorc. So there needs to be some options to scale it up a little bit. Damage output in general, well, it is kind of down bad. So everyone knows that Sorcs are the weakest class. It's getting, well, weaker basically. And it is also just falling behind more because, for example, Druids are getting buffs and these kind of things. So then they definitely need like some generic buffs here across the board, maybe to the base skills, similar to what Druid has gotten, for example. Maybe some improvements here on the glyphs, on the paragons. There's a few little things they can tweak. Maybe the key passes are also a good option. So there is a lot of things they can do, but also I would like to see Sorc builds rely a little bit less on stagger in the future. It's not as bad as rogues because they don't have like 7 different aspects that buff their damage against CC targets, but they do have stuff like Hoarfrost and the control glyph and a few little things like that depending on the build, and I don't like it too much. And another thing that I've considered problematic is Devouring Blaze. This passive is so powerful that if you don't have it, you're just not playing Sorc, basically. And that is kind of bad. And this is kind of like the same problem that Druids have with Envenom. You need to have poisons, you need to have your ranks to Devouring Blaze or your ranks to Envenom on your neck, and else your build sucks. So I think Devouring Blaze needs a nerf, and other stuff needs a buff, and a pretty major one, so that this kind of like evens out a little bit, and you're not forced to put like Firebolt enchant into every build and these kind of things. So that would be nice. That's kind of like a long-term perspective here. Then let's talk about enchantments. Basically, all of them are trash. There are a few exceptions. Firebolt is used a lot, maybe Frozen Orb sometimes, and you know, here and there some builds have their own little enchant, like Ball Lightning if you play a Ball Lightning Sorc and so on. But I think we need a lot more enchants that are like Frozen Orb, that have both kind of like its damage viability for a Frozen Orb build and its utility viability as a non-Frozen Orb build. You know, in the past a lot of builds actually ran Frozen Orb enchant just to make stuff chilled and frozen and vulnerable. Now a lot of builds don't really need that anymore in modern D4 because of freeze tempers and because of, you know, lots of ways to apply vulnerable, especially for lightning builds, and has become very easy. So you don't really need that anymore, but I really love the design of the Frozen Orb enchantment and the Frozen Orb skill that went with it. And I want to see a lot more stuff like that. I want to make a build and I want to not know beforehand which of the enchantments I choose, because there's just so many cool options. So that's what we need basically. These enchantments have not been touched since launch. Besides like 1 or 2 little tweaks here and there. Basically everything is outdated and it needs a major overhaul. I think maybe this is too late now for Season 5, but the expansion is coming, and if that is not part of the expansion, then it's time for Riot, I'd say. And we have Shatter. That's like the last big point here for the Sorcs. This key passive is mega bugged right now and has like some insane double dipping, so that needs to be fixed. I already told the devs about this a while ago, and nothing has changed in Season 4 so far. But it is like kind of like pretty toxic gameplay, I would say, with how this actually works. It is like extremely fishy, extremely hard to do, and yeah, like everyone will cry now, oh, you want to nerf Sorcs? No, I don't want to nerf Sorcs, but I also don't want to have this single key passive that gives people like plus 40 tiers in the pit under the extreme circumstances that they have GG gear, fish for the GG map, and then get lucky with the boss. You know, this is just kind of stupid. And they should like just make this a bit more, you know, baseline, higher power level on the Sorc in general, and not have this crazy roller coaster with this Shatter passive. So at the very least, this double dipping bug needs to be fixed, but I'd also like to see a bit of a redesign for this to be more even out and also do something on the bosses, for example. All right, let's talk about Barbs. So one big problem that Barbs have is perma immortality that has not been addressed, to my surprise. So Martial Vigor and Guttural Yell can be tempered up to 25 ranks, and you get perma 100% damage reduction with Martial Vigor or after shouting with this one. In general, this whole Barbarian Protection recipe that gives you also, I think, defensive stance, which is not that problematic, but also Imposing Presence that gives you ridiculous amounts of lives. I think that should just be deleted, honestly. Barbs are tanky boys by default. They don't need this temper, and it just leads to these problems. And unless they do some kind of special rules or mega nerf those passives, which would be kind of weird as well, because they would nerf the passive because the temper exists. But what about the builds that don't run the temper? Like, yeah, it doesn't make much sense. So I think just delete the entire thing. And then the problem is solved. Barbarians are a bit more balanced. And here we go. So this is my 2 cents on that topic. Then we have Gushing Wounds. So that's my favorite thing to talk about for the Barbs. A lot of people say, oh, Barbs have 4 weapons. Of course, they're OP. While it does kind of contribute, I think that's mostly a result of the bad balancing here that the devs have shown, and not so much that Barbs have 4 weapons. I think it would be not that hard to balance out Barbs to be, you know, more fairly performant, I guess, in the end game. It is just kind of like a natural, you know, synergy that Barbs have with good gear, I guess, because they have more slots, so they have more aspects, so they have more stats. You can masterwork more stuff, so there's like a longer and like more, you know, steep progression curve basically for the late game. The thing is that there is Gushing Wounds, which is the real problem when it comes to Barbs in Season 4 right now. Now, of course, there's like some other builds that don't actually run it, like Bash. Bash is getting an 80% nerf though, very rightfully so. But Gushing Wounds is actually a real issue because it's a key passive that gives you a damage modifier of up to something like 5,000% damage or so. If you scale up a lot of crit chance, a lot of crit damage, then this is like something what you expect, something like a times 30 to times 50 or so damage buff. And the thing is that most other key passives in the game give you something like a 30%, maybe 50%, maybe 100% damage buff. So Gushing Wounds is literally like 50 to 100 times stronger than other key passes in the game. So that is like a really big reason why Barbs are so powerful right now with Flay, with like the Whirlwind, Bleed stuff, with Tyrio's Might, and these kind of things. There's also the problem that you have Berserk Ripping aspect, which allows you to convert any flat damage effect into a bleed and then scale it off Gushing Wounds. And this means that basically everything that is like Tyrio's Might, Rakanov Boots, Holy Bolts Elixir, we've seen that. It was basically exclusively a Barb item for the entire Season 4, outside of the buggy Necro stuff with the minions. this stuff only works well for the Barbs, especially if you play Bleed and Gushing Wounds. So this can never be good for anything that's not a Bleed Barb, and I think that's problematic. That limits design space massively. So I think Gushing Wounds needs a cap, it needs a massive nerf or something like that, and Berserk Ripping needs to be changed to work similar to Sword Expertise. Sword Expertise has almost the same wording as Berserk Ripping aspect, and it does not apply all these item effects. It does not apply Tyrius Might and these kind of things. And I think Berserk Ripping working with these is just a bug. So that is like my take on this at least. And it also just doesn't make sense. Like even if that was not a bug, it doesn't make sense because of what I just explained. Something like Tyrius Might could be massively buffed. Something like the Rakonov Boots can be massively buffed. Something like Holy Bolts can be massively buffed if Gushing Wounds and or Berserk Ripping are actually tweaked to be reasonable. And then every class could use those items. Every class could try to make a build around Tyrius Might, not just, you know, Whirlwind Barb. So this is kind of the main problem that we have here, and this is kind of the main reason why Barbs are so ridiculously powerful. I think the 4 weapons could be addressed in other ways. A lot of people are always talking about that, and I think you just need to tweak the Barb numbers correctly, honestly. Like, they have glyphs, they have legendary Paragon nodes, they have key passes, they have other stuff on the tree. You know, you can tweak the tempers that Barbs have. You can tweak the aspects that are Barb specific. There are so many ways to like lower their overall power gain a little bit as they progress to even out the impact of those 4 weapons. It wouldn't be that hard to just like, you know, take some of the class specific aspects and lower the numbers. Like, why is that not happening? Why does an aspect like the Hoda aspect that gives like this AoE and the quake around it, why does it also have a damage number, for example? Like, it doesn't need it. Like, this is like just one of those examples where it's like, yeah, they just made these 4 weapon slots, but they also gave Barbs just kind of like the same numbers on everything else. So of course that makes no sense. So this is like the 4 weapons topic, and then there's the Gushing Wounds topic, and I think both can be addressed fairly easily if you try a little bit. So this is like my message to the devs here. Alright, let's continue with some good news though. The Third Blade. Really cool item. I love playing with this. I made a Deathblow build that I think is going to be pretty good in Season 5. You can go check that out. I have a video on this. That is really something I'm looking forward to. However, it's kind of like just another Hoda and upheaval, so to say. So it doesn't really have like a huge distinction there. And it also doesn't really work that well for Rupture and Steel Grasp. So these are not really like big carries. Rupture kind of. At least for big AoE, it has some insane scaling in AoE because it multiplies its damage with the amount of targets it hits. So that's kind of wild. Then we have the Unbroken Chain, Kratos Barb. I guess a lot of people remember that build. I made that like a year ago in Season 0, and a lot of people loved it. But it has not really ever been like that relevant again, at least outside of leveling. It was still really good for leveling, playing Walking Arsenal Barb, not necessarily with Iron Maelstrom. Now we have this item to try to make Iron Maelstrom good, but it's really bad, honestly. So Kratos Barb stuff. Walking Arsenal is kind of down bad in general, thanks to, for example, stuff like this existing, but also like this item is just not good enough. It needs like some actual effect that scales the damage of Iron Maelstrom if that's supposed to be some kind of viable choice. Even in Hell Tides, it kind of works, but that's about it basically. And considering you have to sacrifice the Iron Maelstrom slot and then play an entire build based around Iron Maelstrom, yeah, that is really weak. So that's mostly like a meme thing. I will probably make a Kratos Barb anyway, just because it's fun and it's kind of good for Hell Tides and for leveling. So I might just make like a Hell Tide Kratos Barb and just park him somewhere and then farm my mats there whenever I want. So that is something, but that's about it here. And then we have basic attack builds in general. I just have it in Barb feedback now, but it's like a problem for all classes, I'd say. They made like basically an entire set of like Shard of Erafil, a new unique, Pain Gorgers, Lucion, the new unique, and then Starless. So some of these items have a downside, like it makes your basic attack cost resources, and then it costs even more, but then you don't really care because Starless Skies exists, and basic attacks generally don't have resource problems. They actually generate resources in many cases. So overall, basic attack is like the name of the game right now, and I do expect you're going to see some pretty heavy nerfs to a lot of these items, but also Blizzard has said they want to buff a lot of uniques, but I don't really see them buffing uniques to the level of being competitive with this, honestly. Like, this is just too crazy. A lot of people say the same, and you're gonna have the same like Bash meta, Flame meta, Heartseeker meta, and so on all of the classes. And yeah, it's nice to have viable basic skills, but I think it would be even nicer if we also had other viable skills and other viable builds. I mean, rogues do have that at least, and the Sorcs, But outside of that, not really all that many builds that are not like really, or the classes that are not dominated by these basic attacks. Maybe Necros, I guess, since they just have awful basic attacks. It definitely needs a bit of like a tweaking here. Also, Flay Duration Tempers, which extend the duration of the bleed. So you basically do more damage per Flay. Having that as a utility temper now, which previously was a weapon temper, it doesn't make much sense that it buffs the bleed still. Like, I thought that it was probably just a bug in general because, for example, we have other cases of, let's say, Heartseeker duration on the Rogue, and Heartseeker doesn't have any dot attached to it, so it only buffs the buff, basically. That gives you like the extra crit and the extra crit damage and these kind of things. And that was a weapon temper that has now also become a utility temper. And Flay duration buffing the bleed was probably an oversight or a bug in the first place. And for some reason it has not been changed, even though it has become utility temper now. So for some reason we have like one of the strongest tempers in the entire game that you can put on 6 different slots on the armor, basically. And you just buff Flay to the moon, and that will remain true in Season 5 currently. So I'm not sure if that was intended, but it seems at the very least extremely odd that this didn't remain a weapon temper if that is intended. So I think that this Flay duration should not buff the bleed and only buff its buff effect, which would make it an actual utility temper and a kind of a competitive option with other utility tempers, instead of just being like the craziest thing you can put on any barb build, basically. So that's my 2 cents about this here. Double swing could need some love, especially pure double swing builds. It's basically only Twister, and that's it. I guess the same goes for Whirlwind. And this is also some stuff that I'd like to see tweaked in the future. I guess for now, double swing and Whirlwind work, thanks to the Gushing Moon shenanigans and the Twister shenanigans. But they don't really have any output on their own, so that needs to be addressed here. Alright, let's talk about the Necromancers. So we have number 1, Bone Spirit. In general, Necros has received quite some nerfs in Season 5, in some cases rightfully so, but there were also some collateral damage nerfs with a little compensation. For example, they nerfed a Blighted Aspect, which I do agree needed a nerf because it was just so all-defining. They have not really done a good job at reworking other key passes, at reworking other aspects, or giving Necros some other power back. The only build that really profits here is Bone Spirit. So right now we have a bit of an option in Season 4 to play Blight with the new Ebon Piercer, and we have the minions, and we have other variations of minions. We have Thorns, and we have Bone Spirit. So there's a bunch of pretty good builds. In Season 5 it's like Bone Spirit that is like mega buffed, and everything else that's kind of nerfed. So there's like a massive gap here because they made this new item for Bone Spirit. It feels really fun to play. This new item really solves a big issue that the build had as well, which I love. So in general, Bone Spirit is cool, fun, really powerful, but then there's like basically not much else. So that's the main problem here with the Necros. So in general, they nerfed all this stuff here, as I explained. Blood builds are down bad. There's not even any synergy between like Blood Orbs and Blood Surge, for example. They need a lot of power here. They have been trying to buff them a little bit, but Bloodlands has no single target damage. Blood Surge, probably even worse. So there needs to be some single target action here. In general, there's just not really much to look forward to for those Necros right now, I gotta say. And especially if they also like, you know, tweak down some of the generic uniques, like Crown of Lucian, that is like overpowered as hell. Then yeah, it's like Necros, yeah, Bone Spirit, yeah, people were hitting like 10 billion or something like that. It seems to be like maybe even the strongest build in the entire game right now on the PTR. But again, it's the only build really that is really powerful. So it is like very overtuned, and the rest is somewhat okay to undertuned, basically. And I think that gap needs to be closed here. So it was somewhat okay in Season 4 with the intra-class balance. It is not okay in Season 5 at all. Basic attack builds basically do not exist, even with all these items there. So maybe they could do some cool tweaks there, buff the basic attack numbers a little bit. So maybe we can do a rebuild. I would love to play a rebuild, for example, or something like that. So that would be cool. Key passes are... they are in a spot where there are builds that don't even run a key passive that exists. Or where the key passive is just kind of like almost irrelevant at least. So that is a problem here. They need like at least 1 or 2 more key passes, and they maybe need a bit of a redesign on the existing ones just to make them a bit more viable. And one good thing I want to mention here about the Necros is new mobility aspects. They feel amazing. So they have like this Blood Mist evade aspect that is amazing. They have this Sever aspect that has a very short cooldown. It feels good. I would love for the Sever aspect maybe to not have such a delay after the Sever. Like you press the button and then you move, and then you do the swipe. It would be nice if the swipe would just occur automatically or like faster or something like that. It has a bit of like a clunky delay where you can move again. But outside of that, these mobility aspects are all really amazing. Necros are going to be zooming, so that is something that makes it feel really good to play the class now. But yeah, like this whole like balancing part here with Bone Spirit being ridiculous and then everything else being at least like 2 tiers behind or so, I guess. When you compare to like, let's say, the max roll tier list, yeah, that is not good. So I hope that is getting addressed a little bit here for the Necros. Other than that, yeah, this is kind of like the big picture, but there could be like a lot of feedback about individual builds and how to solve certain problems. I just wanted to give like the overview here. And lastly, we have the Druids. So I played the Druids quite a bit in Season 4 and also on the PTR. I like the Druids a lot, so it's like my second most favorite class, so I'd like to see that a little bit tuned. They are getting some buffs in Season 5. A lot of the basic base multipliers on their skills are getting buffed on their core skills, for example. They remove shepherds. It's now an exclusive like companion build item, and now you actually have a lot more skills on your bar on those builds. So that's kind of cool, and this generally makes druids better. It especially makes druids generally very tanky. So druids are beefy boys now. By default, basically, like you cannot die. That's basically like Barb 2.0. Just without this insane power, but a lot of builds are also pretty decent. Landslide is getting a massive buff, so I tried a pure landslide build. I also tried like this storm slide build. Personally, I like the pure landslide quite a lot, and this is definitely something I will be playing in Season 4, and that is looking really good. Companions are looking pretty good despite like 1,000 bucks they have. So those are the top 2 builds right now, but again, Blizzard has kind of destroyed the intra-class balance. In Season 4, Druid was very well balanced. It had a lot of builds that were all very close to each other, and now it has like 2 builds that are noticeably better than the rest, I would say, but at least in general, like it has become overall more viable. Druid has been beefed up a little bit in general, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I would like to see the other builds a little bit buffed as well. Druid is still a bit on the weaker side when you compare to like Barbs and Rogues, for example. So I think, you know, Tornado, it would also be nice if, for example, Tornado just becomes a little bit more playable, I guess, in the early game. Maybe reduce the cost of Tornado a little bit or something like that. Maybe tweak the numbers again a little bit. So there are some options here that would maybe help out a little bit. Some key passes are still really terrible, like this Wolf passive. That is, I think it's Lupine Ferocity or so. Try to buff it. It's still not really exciting, to be honest. They have also like a general problem with shapeshifting being like really powerful and human form just not really being very great. So I would love to see some options here, something that competes with Tempest Raw, for example, and these kind of things, where you can be like a human caster. It would also sell a lot more cosmetics, I guess, in the shop, little hint. But in general, yeah, I think that there needs to be some more tweaking here. Druids are looking okay. They have at least 2 very good builds, but people might not love companions, so they only have Landslide then, and everything else is, yeah, fine, basically, and that's about it. So this is where Druids are, and I would like to see that maybe tweaked a little bit. For companions specifically, they also have a lot of bugs with the tags, like all the werewolf, nature magic, and storm tags do literally nothing once you acquire them for companions. So there's no effect that actually works with any of these tags. Yeah, once you have them on your, it's just cosmetic tags basically. That's kind of funny. That would buff companions even further, which I guess is okay. It depends on like what exactly comes out of this, but I guess you would have at least more options to build them, which is cool. Let's talk about the Cataclysm Glove. I think really good job here. This definitely opens up some interesting design where you have like infinite resources and you try to get your Cataclysm to have permanent uptime, which is achievable in separate ways. And a very fun item for sure. It even opens up its own build. There's actually like a Cataclysm Druid now that is similar to like the Hurricane Druid, but with lightning storms everywhere. So kind of cool fantasy there as well. So in general, very nice, and also gives you like some ways to build your character differently. Because, for example, you cannot use Ancestral Guidance. You don't need resources. So overall, kind of interesting item. I love it. I talked about the shapeshifting problems, and I've talked about the poison problems as well a little bit briefly earlier. But yeah, Envenom is too powerful. It is too necessary to have on every build. You need to put it on every amulet. The only build that doesn't run Envenom is like Vincia, because it's a dot build that can't crit. But outside of that, like every build needs Envenom. It's just so good, and I think that needs to be tweaked. Like it's just like always the same thing. You always need to have poisons. It would be nice if there was like non-poison builds on the Druid. If there was at least an option not to play it. If Envenom was like a weaker passive, and maybe some other stuff would be buffed a little bit on a class. You know, you can buff the glyphs, you can buff some other passes. You know, there are some options here. Maybe make a new passive or like a new cluster of passes. For example, the human form casting stuff that I talked about earlier. There would be some options here to make Envenom not so required. And I think that would help the class overall with more build diversity, with more exciting choices. There's a lot of stuff that he could do that he cannot do right now because Envenom is way too good. You cannot really feasibly run like unique amulets outside of like maybe the really busted Locrance amulet that I have introduced in season 5, but that is probably getting nerfed. So it's just back to get Envenom or bust. And that also concludes basically the entire feedback document here. I said I will try to keep it short, but turns out there's a lot of feedback that I have. So this is what I wanted to discuss with all of the classes. Of course, there might be more stuff. I have not played every single build on this PTR. That is kind of like impossible, even when I play like 12 hours a day. But I do have a good overview of what's going on with all the classes. I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people in my chat that gave me feedback as well. The Maxwell guys that I've been talking to and so on. So yeah, this is kind of like where it's at right now. As an overall class balance picture, I would say we have like Barbs and Rogues up here with a few builds. Especially Rogues have probably the most variety of good builds, I'd say. So Rogues are looking really powerful. And then we have kind of like Necro, like one really good build, maybe the best build in the game, the Bone Spirit. And then everything else kind of like a bit lower here. And then we have Druids somewhere in the middle of the pack, I'd say, like this. And then we have like Sorcs kind of like at the bottom. And they have really nothing to look forward to besides like Lightning Spear, which is really cool. But yeah, I do expect especially a lot of buffs to the Sorcs, so that would be nice if we get like some general improvements there. And let's see what else will come out of this. Unique reworks. I guess the unique reworks might shift the balance a lot right now. This is just like an early picture, and we'll see what will happen exactly. Some of those builds have multiple unique items. For example, Fireball Sorc has 2 items that will probably get some really beefy buffs, both of them. So maybe you're gonna play Fireball or something like that. So hope you enjoyed my feedback here. Let me know what you think. Let me know what other points you would like to discuss that maybe I can also forward to the devs. I guess now is the time. They have like almost a month to go for the season. So they have a lot of time to work on our patch, give us the final patch notes, etc. And let's see what comes out of it. For now, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.